All right, guys, so you've got the property under contract. What happens next? Well, there's a few main points that I want to talk about. Number one, you're going to want to get with your lender right away. They're going to have several things you're going to want to be doing. We'll call this a loan closing checklist, which we will go through a little bit later. Number two, we're going to need to get values done. That's going to be done by your lender, but the property's going to have to be valued. And then number three, you're going to want to get your inspections done, okay? So let's talk about all of these. We'll come back to this. The values, depending upon what type of a deal that you're getting and what you're doing with that. So if you're getting a property that you're not planning on doing any work on, then it'll be done as an as-is value, which typically is somewhat close to what you're paying for that, but occasionally you can get a really good deal and the value can be worth more. But a lot of lenders are going to use the purchase price as the as-is value. But some lenders will allow that if the value comes in higher, that you can use some of that equity. So you've got that. The other one you've got is an ARV, which stands for after repaired value. The after repaired value is what is the property worth once the repairs are done to that. Now, in order to establish this after repaired value, a contractor bid and a scope of work needs to be done. So it's going to say, hey, okay, we've got to do a scope of work to get this after repaired value. And that has to, this contractor bid scope of work has to be done before we can value the property, because it depends on what you're doing to the property will make a determination for this value. This value is done one of a few ways. So one way that this is done is by what's called evaluations. Evaluations is where we send two independent real estate agents that live, work, and play in the area to the property that make a determination on the after repaired value based upon the contractor's bid and the scope of work, or as is if there isn't one. Another way that it can be done is it can be do a walkthrough with a desktop. Basically what happens is a representative will go through and look at the property, and then an appraisal will be done through a desktop, and then a final value will be reached for one of these. Another way that it can be done is through a full appraisal. Now, it's really going to depend on what loan product you're actually going for that will make a determination as to which one of these is going to be done. But any way you look at it, there needs to be some sort of valuation that needs to be done to the property. That's going to be ordered with your lender. They're the ones who are going to need to do that. You're not going to want to call an order appraisal on your own, because no lender is going to accept that. It has to be ordered by the lender, and it has to be through their process, or through their approved vendors. Everybody's got different things that they're looking for on that, but you're going to want to make sure that you get that through the values. Now, the next thing is the inspection, okay? So what are we doing with this inspection is we want to make sure you haven't spent a lot of time in the property. So you want to make sure the property condition is somewhat what you thought it was, which means when you make that offer, the seller gives you rights to get into that property. You have to make arrangements with them, but then you can get into the property to do what's called a full inspection. So to do that inspection, you can do one of a few things. You can hire a home inspector. A home inspector is basically going to go through the entire property, and they're going to give you a report. That report is going to tell you about problems that have been found throughout the property. Some of those might be minor problems, like there's a missing plug cover, and some of those may be major problems, like the GFCI breaker doesn't work, or there's a hole in the foundation that you didn't know about. Now, you have to realize that a home inspection is only as good as what they can see. A home inspection is a visual inspection. They're not going to be looking past the walls, those types of things. Now, they may have like a moisture meter that they can use to see if they find moisture anywhere. The great thing about this is you have a home inspection, you're going to have a really good idea of what's wrong with the home. However, you're not going to know some things, like I say, looking behind the walls. Now, if you are going to get a home inspection, some add-ons or additional things you can do is you can have someone send a camera down through the sewer system to make sure that the sewage line that's coming to the house is actually in good shape and doesn't have any issues. That's something you can't see visually, but if you add that on, you can do that. Another thing that you can do is a inspection, where basically you take a swab, or you can do it yourself, or you could hire a home inspector to do that, where you take a swab, you go throughout the property, and they see if there's any traces of methamphetamines. That's something you probably going to want to know prior to purchasing that property. The other thing that you can do is get somebody in the attic, get somebody on top of the roof. Now, I recommend, if you're just getting started, a home inspection is a great way to go. It does take some more time and it does cost some more money, but you're gonna learn through that experience. So my recommendation is, if you hire a home inspector, make sure that you're there for the last part or the last hour and have them walk you through the property and make sure that you understand what's here, what's there, what is happening to the property. It's a great way to learn. Now, as you get more experience, my recommendation is you start getting some general contractors. So what I stopped doing is I stopped doing home inspections. I started with home inspections, but I stopped doing that. And I started just getting my general contractor. And I would have my general contractor get on the roof and take a look at it. Is there any soft spots? Anything we need to worry about? Those types of things on the roof. I would have him look at the foundation and see if he could see any foundational issues or anything that was going on there. I would have him look at the HVAC system, which is the heating and air conditioning system. What year is it? You can see that from the sticker. This is something you can actually do on your own. What year is that HVAC system? I would also have him take a look at the electrical panel. How old is the panel? What type of breakers are there, so that I have a good idea of the life expectancy of that. I would have him take a good look at the plumbing. I'm looking at all the systems, right? What type of plumbing is there? Is it PEX plumbing? Is it old galvanized plumbing? Is it copper? What are we dealing with there, and what problems might we see with that? So if I'm looking at the roof, the foundation, the HVAC, the electric, and the plumbing, and then we do an exterior walk around just to see if there's any problems. That's gonna take care of most of our major problems. What we're looking for something is that's gonna be a game changer. It's really gonna hurt us. Now, in addition to this, I would do swabs for any type of a meth inspection. And I may do something with mold with a moisture meter that I would use on my own, so that I could get a feel for if we have any concerns with that. Typically, you'll know if there's mold, and it's pretty visible. Or you'll see some soft spots. So that's what I would do. So this is kind of my modified after I'd had some experience with doing some home inspections and I had done some fix and flips, or I've done some rehab projects and really had a better feel for that. So that's the next real step that you're gonna wanna do, is get going with this. Now, you are gonna spend some money on this, whether you spend some money with a general contractor to go look at that. And the idea here is you've gotta realize that this is kind of like insurance. You're basically paying for the home inspection or the general contractor to go and do these things for you. And if they find a big problem, they're saving you from getting into a big problem. Now, if that's the case, you would want to go and renegotiate with the seller. You might find that the roof has a massive problem that nobody knew about. You send the pictures to the seller and say, we need to reduce the price by $8,000 so I can take care of this problem on the roof. The seller may say no. And if the seller says no, you have the option to buy the property at the price, or you can reject it and not move forward with the property, but you still would have spent money on the home inspection or whatever the case is. That's okay, because you spent $500 to save yourself from an $8,000 problem. So it's not the best news, but it's a lot better than having an unexpected $8,000 bill that you weren't planning on. So think of it as insurance. You hope that you don't have to use it, but you're glad you have it when you do. So that's what you're looking at for the inspections. Now, next thing, as we're getting our inspections done, there's a deadline for the inspections to be done. And you've got to be done with those inspections prior to that deadline. And if you have a problem, you're going to renegotiate the price or remove yourself from the contract so that your earnest money does not become in jeopardy. So that's what we're going to want to do with that. Now, let's talk a little bit about values. What happens if the values don't come in for what you're hoping for or what you need them to be? Well, in most contracts, you have an appraisal deadline or a value deadline, which basically says by this date, we will value the property and we'll make sure the property value is in line with where it needs to be. Now, if it's not there, then you're going to need to remove yourself from the contract or renegotiate and say, hey, we need to renegotiate, and they may not allow you to renegotiate. They may say, nope, we need that price, and you may have spent some money on an appraisal. Again, you're saving yourself from a big headache. You would hate to buy a property and find out it's worth $50,000 less than what you thought that it would be after those repairs are done to it, or even an as is, and find that out after you're responsible and liable for the loan. You don't want that to happen. So you're going to have the appraisal that's going to help you in justifying those prices, and you're in lots of cases going to need to have a general contractor's bid so that you can justify the scope of work and determining what that after repaired value is. The other kind of contingency that you have is a loan denial. And the idea with this is any time up into that loan denial deadline, which is going to be a date, if you remove yourself from the contract, you would get your earnest money back. But you're responsible as the buyer to pay for any inspections or appraisals or anything you're getting done to the property. One of the things for an inspection type period before you become the buyer of the property. Another one that happens quite frequently is termites. You want to get a termite inspection. It's typically $100, but if you have termites, it could cost you $10,000 or more to get fixed. And so you want to know that. Now, the nice thing is with these reports is we can then take them to the seller and say, seller, you have termites and you have a problem. Now the seller is required to disclose that information to anybody else that comes to buy the property. They can't not say it in most states, so they have to disclose it if they're aware of it. And if I have a termite report that says that there's termites and I've sent it to them and said, here you go, you've got termites, you might as well work with me because now you're going to be required to disclose that to anybody else that comes to buy. It gives us the opportunity to have that conversation, have that discussion, and have that renegotiation based upon this new information. However, the seller may say, no, I'm not going to, and then you would either have to move forward at the price or remove yourself from the contract. And in doing so, you would then take your earnest money would be returned to you in most contracts is the way that it's written. Okay, so that's the big stuff that needs to happen once you go under contract. You need to get in touch with your lender so the lender can start the valuing of that property right away. You also are going to need to get a scope of work together, and that scope of work is going to need to have a contractor's bid attached to that so that that value can get established. You're also going to need to start working on your inspections, both the termite inspection and any other inspections or home inspections you want to have done on the property to make sure that you're not running into a bigger problem than what you're aware of. So that's the process that you're going to want to be looking at. So the next thing I want to talk about two things here. Okay. One thing I want to talk about is how do you know what the scope of work should be, okay? And then number two, what we're going to go through is the closing checklist. What is required so that you can work with the lender to get the loan to make that actually happen? We'll talk about that. First, let's talk about scope of work. The question is, how do you know what you should be doing to the property? What type of work you should be doing to the property? Well, the way that you do that is through comparables. If you remember, we went back and we looked at comparables in establishing our value. And one of the things that we're going to do now is actually look at those and see what they look like. So, okay, to make things simple, I'm just going to choose a random property here. I don't know anything about this property or what's going on with it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to comparable properties. I can look at stuff that's on the public record or that's on the MLS, and I can look over the past year, or I can shorten that to say, I want to look over the past 6 months. I don't know if that's exactly 6 months, but we'll just say July, okay? I can change the square footage, the distance away, and I can look and see what these properties actually sold for, okay? So if I'm looking at this, I can sort these by the sales amount. So I can see that okay, this is a rent. I'm sorry, we want just sold and property type. Let's just do single families. And okay, that's a rent, that's a rent. So I can see two 275 is kind of the low end and 340 is the high end, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with this 275 and I'm gonna look at it and I'm gonna say, hey, what's the condition of this property? So let's just look at some pictures here, okay? So what we're asking ourselves is, what is the scope of work that needs to be done to our property so that it's the same or better quality than another property? Let's look. It looks like that one doesn't have very many pictures. Let's look at this one. We're going to get whatever pictures are available, and we archive those. Okay, here we go. This one has more pictures. This is what was put on there. So I'm going to look at this. Okay, let's look. Paint looks good. The moldings look decent. The carpet looks so-so. You know, this is more of a builder's grade, but they do have a two-tone paint on it. You know, nothing like crazy, but it's not like horrible either, right? So this is kind of what we're looking at here. So if I want my property to sell in this range, what did this one sell for? 326. What did it actually sell for? Let's go back. If I want my properties to sell for 275, that's the type of condition that the property needs to be in, okay? Now, if I want my property to sell for more money, it's got to be in a better condition in order to justify that higher amount. So a lot of people get confused as the scope of work that they should be doing on that, what they should be doing to get the property sold. And the answer is, it needs to be the same as what your competition was, okay? What is your competition? What is recently sold? And that's the next thing that we can look at here, is we can look at stuff that is on the MLS exclusively, and instead of sold, we can look at active, we can look at pending, we can look at contingent. Okay, so what do we have here? Well, look, we've got one property for 310. We've got another property for 496 within a half mile of this property. What are the differences between these? Okay, because that's a big difference. So I'm going to look at actives and I'm going to look at solds, and I'm going to use the lower of the actives or solds is I'm going to use to determine my value on the property, which we have all kinds of information on how to value properties. But I'm also going to use that information to determine what I need to do to the property to come up with a scope of work, which is one of the things that we like to do is we walk our members through and helping them determine the scope of work. And so you know what needs to be done, and working with your contractor then to get that so you can get the end price. The bottom line is, you don't want to under improve the property, not do enough to get the values. You also don't want to over improve the property where what you're doing is not going to get you dollars back. You want to make sure for every dollar you put into it, you're going to get more than $1 back from that work that you're going to put into the property, because there's costs and those things involved, and you want to have a profit margin. So that's how a scope of work is actually going to be established, is a walkthrough of the property, looking at your comparables, your solds, and your actives that are in the same area that you're planning on selling your property for, and making sure your property is in the same condition as those. And the only caveat I like to give is I'd like to do one thing to make it just a little bit better. I don't want to overdo the values or overdo the rehab or the scope of work. I want to make it just a little bit better. So for example, let's say that everything has vinyl floors in the kitchen and the bathrooms. I may spend an extra few $1,000s and do tile floors. Or let's say that it has ceramic countertops or just regular countertops. Well, I may say, let's put granite in. Now, I'm not going to do both of those things. If everything in the area has granite, then I need to put granite countertops in, or solid surface countertops. I've got to do that. But if everything in the area doesn't have that, I like to choose one thing. I typically like that to be in bathrooms or the kitchen and make it just a little bit nicer by spending a few $1,000s, because I want to stick out, especially in a market where it's more of a buyer's market than a seller's market. I want to make sure I'm the best price and the best quality. So I want to be the same as those other ones and have something that's just a little bit nicer that I spent a few $1,000s more on, that it kind of has that sizzle where somebody says, you know what, these houses are practically the same, but that one has the granite countertops and it's the same price as the one that doesn't. Let's go ahead and move forward with that property, or let's buy that property. That's what I'm looking for when it comes to that. I want to put a little bit of sizzle on it. All right, next, let's talk about closing checklist. Okay, what you're seeing here is our closing checklist, and we'll make sure that you don't have any specific information, but we start with the property, the LLC, our financial investors information, the agent's information, if there is an agent, title company's information. These are all things that the loan processor is going to be working on. And these are the things that need to be done in order for the deal to close. Now, some of these are just administrative, check the box stuff, so I'm not going to jump into those. But what I am going to do is talk about some of the bigger things here that I think you should be aware of. Let's see here. So I'm talking about that. Okay, we've already talked about contractor bids, so I'm not going to talk about that. With your contractor, if you are doing an after repaired rather than as is, you're going to need contractor license. You're going to need to make sure that you've got an agreement with the contractor that's signed. We provide those to make it easier. Contractors' licenses, a termite inspection, making sure there aren't termites, or if there are termites, you're going to have to get a bid to remediate those and include that as part of the costs. You're going to need a copy of the purchase contract, and that purchase contract shouldn't be expired, and that's something that you're going to have to get to your lender. The other thing that you're going to have to get to the lender is verify if there is additional cash to close, that you've got a way to come up with that. So a bank account, or maybe you've got it on a line of credit, or maybe it's coming from your 401k, but there's going to be something to show where those funds are actually coming from. You'll need to provide a copy of your driver's license, okay? You'll also need to sign what's called a letter of intent. Now, typically that will be sent out to you, that will go through the terms of the loan. You'll want to sign that letter of intent. That will break out everything for you. Okay, let's see, and final estimates. Yeah, I'm not going to go through that. Title report. So title report, what a title report does is it makes sure that when you buy the property, nobody can come and say, I actually own that property. And if they do, then the title company is going to pay them off so that you can maintain that property. So what they do is they look back as far as possible, and they look at every transaction that's ever happened, and they ensure the title that you're getting title to that property. Now, there's a lender's policy, there's an owner's policy. Our loan processors will order those. So it's nothing that you need to necessarily know about. Very rarely will there be a problem with title insurance, but there's got to make sure you're getting clear title, or you're not going to be able to buy the property, nor would you want to buy the property, nor would you be able to get a loan on the property if it's not clear title. Once in a blue moon, we see a problem with that, which really is the seller's problem at that point. But title insurance, so that's just something that has to be ordered, and there's a lot of conditions that need to be on that. That's something that the loan processor is going to be working with the title company on to make sure it meets those. Attorney's approval of that. The other thing that we want to look for is what's called a 24-month chain of title. That's typically part of the title report, but that 24-month chain of title shows if there's been any other owners in the property in the last 24 months. And if there has, we want to know who owned it and what they paid for it, because why is the property value changed significantly in the last 24 months? And if so, we need to understand that. Okay, closing protection letter is also something that just comes from the title company. You don't need to be aware of that or worry about that. Errors and omissions insurance, property tax statement, verifying wire instructions. Now, what's going to happen is the title company is going to put together a settlement statement. That settlement statement is going to break down all the costs and everything else, and it's going to be something that you're going to sign when you actually go to close on the loan. That has to be prepared in advance and be reviewed by the lender, so that's something that our processor is going to work on. Next is hazard insurance. Hazard insurance will need to get ordered. We've got some recommendations we can make for you, or you can find your own. The big thing here is it's got to be a vacant dwelling policy. It can't be a renter's policy until you actually have a renter in there. So there's a few conditions that are come upon the hazard insurance. Typically, the processor will just work with the hazard insurance company and get that all taken care of, but it takes time. We can move really fast as a lender, but we're waiting for other people to get us the documentation. And then lots of times they'll get us documentation, but it won't be what we asked for. And so something will have to get changed, and it may take them some time to get that changed and get back to us. And heaven forbid, if they mess up a second time, then we have to ask for it again. So this is a process of hurry up and wait is really what we run into. The other thing we're going to look for is flood. Is this located in a flood zone? And if so, we need to get flood insurance. Now, we're going to look at it. Most of the time, we just get a flood certificate. You don't even know about it or have to worry about it, and we move on. But if it does come back, then we have to start talking about flood insurance. But that's just done by the processor. That's just looked up. Then there's some acknowledgments. There's some non-owner occupied and authorizations that need to be signed by you. Those are going to be digitally sent over to you. There's some other agreements. And then we're going to pull a credit report. And we're going to do a background check to make sure you're not a criminal and to make sure that you don't have any collections judgments and those types of things. Then there's going to be some setup for the LLC. So there's going to be getting an EIN number, registering it, doing that type of stuff for the LLC that's going to be holding title to the property, as well as getting the articles of organization and certificate of organization. Now, again, all of these things are going to be handled by our processor. You are going to need to maybe sign something or do something, but they're not things you actually have to go out there and find. They're things that we're going to be doing in the background. We've got some other agreements that needs. And then we're preparing loan docs. These are the loan docs that actually have to be prepared. So it's nothing that you need to worry about, but that needs to be prepared in order for you to go to the closing table and actually sign. And then we'll go over the cash to close and what that looks like. We'll get final underwriter's approval, get the wire ordered, send the closing package, and ask for you guys to leave a 5-star review. So that's kind of the closing checklist. The reason why that is the closing checklist. I know there's a lot of things on there, but again, most of those things we're able to do, but we're having to work with another third-party vendor that's responsible for that, and we're at the mercy of them providing it to us. We can close really fast. We're waiting on those things, and some of those things could, very rarely, but it could cause a problem with the closing that could have some issues. And so we want to be aware of those well in advance. But that's the closing checklist. So to this point, what has happened is we've talked about what happens once you get the property under contract. We're going to be going through getting the inspections done, getting the values done, getting the loan, getting the closing checklist. All those things need to be getting done. And the next thing that's going to be happening is you're going to be going to the closing table and you're going to be signing the closing docs. And then there's a whole slew of other documents. If you've ever bought your own house before, it's basically you've got a stack of documents to sign, which basically say, hey, if you don't perform, we're going to take this asset from you. That's really what it boils down to. So that's what's going to happen at the closing table. You're going to go to an attorney's office or to a title company with an escrow agent. They're going to be the ones signing. You'll be signing that. They'll be notarizing it, getting a copy of your driver's license. And then once that occurs, then the wire will get transferred to the title company or closing attorney. And then what will happen is it will officially go on record. And what that means is it gets recorded, money gets dispersed out, the recording actually occurs, and now the ownership of the property is now in this new entity that you're in charge of. And then we get into the next steps of what we're doing here, which we'll be covering in our next video.